the COVID-19 and air travel. We 5 years ago, the GAO recommended that in response to the 2014 Ebola outbreak, that DOT work with relevant agencies and stakeholders to develop a national aviation preparedness plan for communicable disease outbreaks. That hasn't happened. Through 2 administrations, it hasn't happened, and now it's a little late. We have CDC trying to deal directly with the airlines to try and get passenger information. There's ongoing conflict over that. So last week, the chair and I wrote to Secretary Chow and asked that she implement the recommendations of the GAO and put together a task force and become more involved in these issues. As CDC shouldn't have to deal with individual airlines. Policies should be developed from knowledgeable people at FAA or DOT, so we can begin to better track passengers. Now, that's obviously not the subject of the hearing today, the state of air travel. My first term in Congress, I introduced a bill called the Airline Passenger Equity Act, and some of those things that were in that bill have been enacted, and some are still out there. There are still issues that need to be dealt with for a better passenger experience. One thing is complaints. Oh, well, there aren't that many complaints. Well, GAO says there's 50 complaints to the airlines for every one that gets to DOT. How do you get in touch? Who knows to get in touch with DOT? How do you do that? For a while, I had gotten a mandate in one or another of the bills that they had to post something with an 800 number at the airline ticket counters, and DOT had to maintain an 800 number. I mean, today, how does anybody know to contact DOT with a complaint? We need more transparency there so we get a better handle on how many problems and complaints there really are. The airlines have record profitability. A big part of that profitability is ancillary fees. Now, it's interesting, that we have laws of, I studied economics, graduate school, undergraduate, laws of supply and demand. The airlines, somehow when it comes to ancillary fees or bag fees, the sky's the limit. It's totally elastic. It's like there is no point at which passenger bookings fall off. In fact, when we were doing the FAA bill in 2018, within a month, all the major airlines raised their bag fees by $5. United just raised theirs again, $5. Are their enplanements going to drop off drastically? No. But they say if an airport, in order to enhance the airport experience, the crowded terminals, the lack of gates, which make planes sit idle and on the runway for hours sometimes at a time, that if passengers, the passenger facility charge has been fixed for 20 years, if that went up by $1 or $2 or, wow, wouldn't even think of $5 like the bag fee, no one would ever fly again. They would be just totally inelastic. $1, won't fly. I mean, the truth is they want control. And even though we can make the case to the airlines that somebody's going to pay for this, and we've had the airports do an excellent job this last year, starting with the hearing last year, documenting the fact, okay, we have to do these projects. Here's an agreed upon project. If we just bond it for 30 years and don't do anything else because we don't have any more bonding authority, here's how much interest we're going to pay. Now, if we could increase the passenger facility charge, the user fee, by this amount, and they give a table and show, with a couple of bucks, wow, you cut the interest costs in half. And what I say to the airlines is, who's going to pay that interest? You're going to pay it one way or another. You're going to pay it in a landing fee, a gate fee, a lease fee, whatever. Someone's got to pay it. So why waste money? Why not raise money in the most efficient way possible and make the improvements we need to the system? But that, we've been stuck on that for quite some time. Passengers with disabilities, we had a hearing last fall on this. One mishandled mobility aid or one dropped passenger is a tragedy and very difficult for a person with a disability. I mean, it's essentially part of their body. And it's unacceptable. I mean, my local paper, in fact, did some investigative reporting about airlines' resistance to repairing, replacing critical, essential mobility aids on a timely basis. I think many of you have seen the photograph of the guy who's taped to an aisle chair. This is unacceptable. Last we asked DOT, or DOT has asked the airlines to specify their training procedures, how they're replacing or handling the aids that are damaged or lost. I have yet to see the results of that. And maybe we'll hear a little bit about that today. So, and then emotional support animals. I'm pleased to see that the DOT is taking some action there. Obviously, we get to peacocks and turkeys and other animals. This is a little bit out of control. And we need, there are legitimate needs for emotional support, and people who legitimately need emotional support and have legitimate, objects, with them, animals, should not be penalized because other people are abusing the system. And then finally, a serious thing is cabin evacuations. DOT is conducting some, I think, inadequate testing with, a partial mock-up shell of an airplane having to do with evacuation times and dealing with seat spacing and issues like that. Before I got to Congress, we'd had the Manchester crash, and people were piled up like cordwood trying to get out of that plane. They died in a survivable crash. It took another 6 years here in the United States to get that one seat removed over the by the wing because the airlines didn't want to lose the revenue. In fact, they came back 2 years later with a fake study that said, oh, it takes longer to evacuate the plane if you take out that row of seats. We beat them back on that, and we still have that. But I'm concerned about it. And we've got to start dealing with the behavior of people. In the Chicago crash, where it took well over almost 2.5 minutes to evacuate a burning plane, people were dragging their carry-on bags with them, big bags, and fighting with the flight attendants over taking their luggage. We've got to figure out how we're going to deal with those problems, and DOT has to reevaluate whether or not we can meet the standard given customer behavior, and something they haven't taken into account. So there's much before us. I look forward to being informed by the panel today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the opening comment, and I will now turn to our witnesses. I would note that